and the miracles that were all around him. It opened up my consciousness. We have to understand it better. It is really about emotional healing.
Steve Jobs famously gave all of the people at his memorial service a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi. So what book would you give to people at your memorial service?
The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Today's guest's life journey offers living proof of what's possible when we remember who we really are. A self-declared atheist in her 20s, Judith Corvin-Blackburn had little patience for God until a single book shattered her worldview and awakened her to the hidden architecture of the universe. An award-winning author of 4 books, Activating Your 5D Frequency, Empowering the Spirit, Journey to Wholeness, and the 6D Ascension Journey, she's an internationally known teacher, transpersonal psychotherapist, and shamanic minister who spent more than 5 decades guiding people to reclaim their true soul nature, so we can collectively transform this planet into the loving, creative, high-frequency world that it's meant to be. Her 10 best list is more than a set of favourite books. It's a map of the ideas, experiences and breakthroughs that shaped her path from conventional training in social work to becoming a pioneer of multidimensional healing and consciousness. From the mystical revelations of Yogananda to the multidimensional cosmology of Barbara Ann Clow, from unlocking soul contracts to envisioning new earth, each one left its mark, shaping not only her own life, but the way she now guides others. Judith Corvin-Blackburn, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. What a great introduction to listen to about what you said about the books. I love it.
So tell me, what do books mean to you?
Gosh, what a wonderful question. They're solace, they're inspiration. It's one of my favorite pastimes, although I ended up as an English undergraduate school. I ended up as an English major where I feel I got the best training as a therapist, frankly. So my go-to books tend to be literature, not philosophy, self-help, multidimensionality, although those have been really important to me. And the spiritual, of course, the spiritual piece. So for fun, I will read fiction. And for inspiration, I will read, the type of books I have on my list. Okay.
So the book that shattered your worldview in your 20s is the book that is at the top of your list, Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, published in 1946. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that this book is consistently in the top 10 of books of all time.
Interesting. Yeah. And yes, not a surprise, because I keep finding people who Yogananda, began their journey. And it's always delightful. And actually, I have his book. I haven't had what I would call many teachers that are actually incarnated, but he's the one, right? And, I read this how many years ago? A lot, over 50 years ago. And he it shattered me. I was still working with it. I was doing yoga every day. I found another book I almost put on the list called Lazy Man's Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment, which was a fun little book from the 60s and 70s. But Yogananda, and as we know, of course, Sandie, books have energy. And so the energy that came through, in addition to his life stories and the miracles that were all around him, what it started to do is it opened up my consciousness. I mean, really, it wasn't even the words, although the words were extremely important to me. But the next thing I knew, I was beginning to, what I would say, experience the divine or experience God. It was not a concept anymore, which actually when I became an atheist when I was 12, if you can become anything at 12, I had a conversation with my father and I thought, yeah, I believe that. So it started out as a very young, uninformed, teenagey kind of piece. But as reading Yogananda, what I would do is I would open my mornings with yoga, and then I would read 3 pages at a time. And little by little by little, my consciousness opened.
So there wasn't one moment, one passage that was boom.
No, it was a whole,
Gradual.
I had some experience from that was boom. But not when I was literally reading it. I think now I would say that I absorbed it on a cellular level. Well, I wouldn't have had the words back then. And suddenly, one evening, under a full moon, my consciousness really opened. And that's when I experienced a sense of grace and the divine. And from then on, and I was like 28, everything changed.
It's about the time coming up to the Saturn return as well.
Yeah.
When everything changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on time. So book number 2 is a book that I really love. Alchemy of 9 Dimensions, Decoding the Vertical Axis Crop Circles in the Mayan Calendar. That's the one that I picked out as the earliest. Of course, Barbara's got several versions of that with different subtitles. So I'm assuming this is the one published in 2004, Barbara Hand-Clough and Jerry Clough. So tell us about this book and how it came into your life and the impact.
Barbara Hand-Clough came into my life through her books when she wrote the book on Chiron, which was in, thinking, maybe the late 80s. It came in mid 80s. I'm not sure exactly the time. A friend of mine who was an astrologer handed it to me. And so from then on, I had really followed Barbara. I haven't read all of her books, but the Pleiadian agenda was next. And then in around 2000 when I came to Alchemy of 9 Dimensions. And it just similar to Autobiography of a Yogi, I was beginning to open to the awareness of multidimensionality. But the way Barbara presented it and presents it in this book, which actually I had the honor of writing the foreword for the 30th anniversary, 25th, 30th, I can't remember which year. It is such an elegant theory, and it worked. For me, it was like everything made sense. And I had a way to teach multidimensionality from there. And then my last 2 books came from there, where activating your 5D frequency, alchemy was really the foundational theory of that book. But what Barbara's done is, let me see if I can find the right words here. She's helped us understand our potential, and I think our who we naturally are. And I will call it before the dimensional descent. We were operating out of 5th and 6th dimensional consciousness. She brings it up to 9, and then of course goes down to 1. They all have their own type of intelligence. But when one realizes that we have the capability of carrying and operating out of all of those dimensions, that's pretty transformative. How's that?
I'll say. Yeah. Her book, I mean, this particular book, it answered so many questions for me, that I just didn't understand. Brilliant book.
Uh-huh.
Book number 3, Bringers of the Dawn, Teachings from the Pleiadians by Barbara Marciniak, published in 1992.
Interesting when you say the dates for me to kind of follow through that. That was the book where I first understood there were star civilizations. And I really identified with Pleiadian ancestry, which I still do quite strongly. And beginning to understand, from the time I was a teenager, I really was committed to changing the world. This was in the mid-60s. The civil rights movement was really coming alive in the United States. And the women's movement was just inching and beginning. And, all of the social changes that were so important. And the environmental movement, we were talking global warming in the late 60s. And so that's always stayed with me. When I read Bringers of the Dawn, all of a sudden I realized, wait, this is a worldwide movement. There are millions of us that have incarnated now to bring forward information that we had here at one point and lost. So we're reclaiming a lot of ourselves. And Bringers of the Dawn was just a lovely way to bring that home for me.
Was that the first book that you discovered that talked about the Pleiadians?
Yes. Yep.
Was that a shock to you?
It wasn't. Don't ask me why. I think maybe when, I was already very open. So, and I had already known for some decades that what we had been taught and conventional wisdom was just on a very narrow bandwidth. So, I was pretty open and it made sense. I felt it. Again, I tend to be very kinesthetic, so that it rang true for me. It didn't feel shocking. It felt exciting. I think that's what I would say.
Book 4, Sacred Contracts by Caroline Myss, 2002.
Yes. Caroline's done some amazing things. And I think I read that book shortly after I saw her in person. I was running a spiritual group out of Springfield, Illinois, and she was speaking in Indianapolis, I think. So we just took a field trip to hear her. And what that book did, and I still have some of this going on for me. I had a strong sense that I had a mission and clarity that it was a mission where I had to get more visible and more public. And that was very scary because I've had other lifetimes where it didn't go so well, as most of us have. And so that I was still working with that trauma. Something about that book and the exercises in the book helped me just break to another level. I think Caroline's a great teacher. She's still doing a lot of really good work. And I've probably read 3 of her books, but that was the one that really jumped.
It's interesting. I mean, looking at this little section, Barbara, both Barbaras, Caroline. The next one, Shakti Gawain, Living in the Light, A Guide to Personal and Planetary Transformation, published in 1985. They were like in a way, they were the way showers, the pioneers.
Absolutely. And also, now we hear lots and lots about the sacred feminine. Back then, they began to open these awarenesses for us. And that's what, Shakti Gawain did a fabulous job, I think, in her book. And these books, too, they're classics. They're never out of date. But as I mentioned when I did my write-up for the book club, what really stood out was her description of the inner sacred male and the inner sacred female. She used different language, and how they are meant to balance each other and move forward in harmony. We could say yin yang. I mean, I don't want to get too genderish, but we all carry those parts within us. So her awareness that the masculine in its most developed form, not in the immature form we've had around here for several thousand years, their mission is to take the visions from the feminine and the wisdom in many ways and create a protective field and perhaps strategies. I'm going to use those words. These aren't Shakti's words, but these are the essence that came to me. Create strategies so that the vision can get out there and be informed, actually work. I'm sure you've run into a lot of people, especially a lot of women, who have these beautiful ideas and awareness, but they can't get it moving. And it's the need to have that inner male working with us to do that.
Yeah, so true. Number 6, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose, Eckhart Tolle, 2005, that one. It was a bit behind.
Yeah, and I had read Power of Now, which was a lovely book as well. But The New Earth, well, I had a few things I took, if I were sitting down with him, I would say, there's an emotional piece here you're missing, but everything else I thought was just fabulous. And again, visions of what we can bring in and what I believe we are little by little bringing in. It's not an easy bring in. There's a lot of resistance, but simply giving us the phrase A New Earth, to me, is like an incredible gift because that's what's happening. The more, and if we have time to talk about my newest book, the more we can visualize and hold a collective vision of what we want to create, the closer we come to creating it. And so I feel like that book really helped a lot.
Book 7 is Destiny of Souls, New Case Studies of Life Between Lives, Michael Newton, published in 2000.
I love this book because at that point, I was getting a lot of downloads myself, and I had read, as you can see, some very inspirational people that got it. And so when I read Michael Newton's book, and that was the first one of his that I read, I'm like, this is new stuff. And it's not that I didn't think there was a before life and afterlife, but I had no awareness of what really it might be like. And the hypnosis that he did and the way he was able to put together the places people went with this, and of course the souls he was supposed to work with were the ones that were attracted. So his data may be skewed, I don't know, but it was wonderful data and so exciting. And it just gave me such a broad understanding that I had been missing before. So when I think of that book, I get excited. This is what happens.
Do you go back to some of these books and read them again?
Now, Barbara, Alchemy I read several times, but not recently. I actually haven't read the newest version of her book, but I feel again, that one's in my cells. And I think I read Autobiography of a Yogi, or at least parts of it, not long after I read it for the first time, but mostly I don't. But they're on my bookshelf, so their energy's here. Let's put it that way.
Book 8 is The Secret of Shambhala by James Redfield, published in 1999. This is a follow-up to the Celestine Prophecies, yes?
Yes, it was his third. He wrote the Celestine Prophecies, the 10th Insight, and this was the third book in that series. And I would have loved it if they all got to Shambhala earlier, where we could have known more about it. But that section at the very end, again, similar to A New Earth, but coming from a different perspective with it, what it looks like when we're operating out of our most evolved selves. So I loved that he put that out.
I never got to that one. I read the other two, but I didn't read that one. Yeah. You said in your write-up, his Shambhala describes what I would now call a world filled with humans operating at their 5th and 6th dimensional frequency, who live in a society that mirrors that of advanced star civilizations. I'm going to talk to you about that after we've finished your list. I want to know more. So moving on to book number 9, The Tao of Physics, an exploration of the parallels between modern physics and Eastern mysticism, Fritjof Capra, 1975.
Yes. Okay. So what he did, and that is a book actually I should reread, but Barbara was able to do that in her Alchemy of 9 Dimensions, pull the physics in, which was just, as you say, it was brilliant. But Capra, of course, was 20 years earlier and was able to help me ground the spiritual concepts that were coming in. I mean, even Yogananda did that a little bit. He had that one chapter on the law of miracles, which talked about if you can speed your vibration up to to go faster than the speed of light, you shift reality, you shift materiality. So, I'm sorry, my computer flashed a text and I lost my train of thought.
You were saying about, it taught you about some of the experiences and the physics of them?
Yes. Oh, so I was able to ground this in science. Right. And that was, again, it was like, okay, so this is not just woo-woo. This is grounded. This has, what would we call it, legs now. And so grateful for that. And it created a foundation. As you can see, these older books, gave me my foundation to bring forward what I was supposed to do.
Seeing as many books as I see, you can't beat some of the older ones. People can, write their versions of, but it's never quite as meaty, and the energy isn't always there.
Yeah. Well, especially if it's become intellectual and not inspirational too.
Yeah. So book number 10, Astrology, Karma, and Transformation by Stephen Arroyo, published in 2011. Are you an astrologer?
I studied it for years, but I don't think it was 2011. Maybe there was a
Was it older? Maybe that's the only one, because I had trouble finding it.
Okay. Yeah, it could be out of print now. I think, I don't think he's written for quite a while. I'm thinking 80. Actually, I'm thinking late 70s.
70s.
Yeah.
I'll go digging.
After we get done, I will look up the date and send it to you.
Yeah, good, because I couldn't find anything before that.
Yeah, to me, it was one of the best astrology books written. I don't consider myself a professional astrologer, but I've studied it for many years, and I'll use it with clients more to look at what's going on transit-wise. But what Stephen's book did, it gave me a very broad understanding of what at least I wanted to do with astrology, which was to look at the transformational planets, the outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, are there to activate us and help us in our transformation. And he did a great job explaining it. I believe, again, this is a long time ago I read it, but took me through a process and influenced how I looked at astrology from then on. Again, it was part of my foundation. I think that's probably the most fair way to say that.
I've read many astrology books, but I hadn't come across his.
He's really good. He wrote another one on relationships that I think is fabulous.
And the astrology of relationships?
Yes. Yep. How to connect it all. So I'm Sandie. It must be out of print, or you would have been able to find it more easily.
Yeah. Your list, it gives us a clear sense of ideas and the influences that shape our path. I'd like to turn now to your own work, especially the 6D ascension journeys, and explore how the concepts you write about there can help us navigate this time that we're living now. Goodness knows we need that life buoy.
Yes, we do. There was a point where I turned the first completed draft into the publisher, I think, and then a year later was when I was in the editing phases. So I had a piece of time when I hadn't read the book. And at the time that the editing started, I was so grateful because I was like, God, it is so insane out there. And reading the book helped me. So I'm hoping that is its point, is to help us. We're in a very, very, the best word is transformative. The worst word perhaps is insane. All our reality is falling apart. And actually my working title for that book was Entering Earth's New Reality. The publisher didn't love that, so I didn't get to use it. But we are entering a new reality, and it's very disconcerting for people. And so you have a huge resistance going on, which is this old paradigm idea that you can make people feel safe if you can imagine really an illusion of the past. Fear, the collective fear, because everything's shifting. People are grabbing a hold of that simultaneously, and that probably doesn't make the evening news anywhere. There's this whole movement of people awakening and being prepared more and more to really shift out of the pain and the trauma that we've been operating out of. Again, I would say 7 to 10,000 years was when we, and maybe more, maybe 13,000 was when we began to lose our connection to who we really are and go into what is called separation consciousness, losing the awareness that we're all interconnected to everything. And so we're reclaiming what was lost. And simultaneously, having been through the trauma and the pain of the past 12,000, 13,000 years, we come out much wiser. So I do think that it serves a higher purpose. I would love to see it being done with less suffering going on collectively. I do believe that it is lower thought, if you will, to assume we have to suffer in order to grow, in order to expand.
So tell me, for someone new to the idea, how would you describe the 6th dimension. And before that, we barely understand what the fourth dimension is. So, explain the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth, and how these are all relevant to one another.
All right. The fifth and sixth are what we're becoming. And so when in my work, I see 5D and 6D really connected. I believe we are evolving from being 3D, 4D beings into opening up this DNA that had been closed down for many, many thousand years and now becoming 5D, 6D humans. So just real quickly, we all know 3D. We wake up, we walk around, we have linear time. 4D is really in the right hemisphere of the brain, and it's very much the emotional and spiritual body. One of the things that came through with Barbara Han-Klau's book is because we're so out of balance, we're easily manipulated on those levels. It's kind of like the lower astral plane. There are all these archetypes popping around. If we're not centered and know who we are, connected to the heart, which is really the fifth dimensional activation, then we get thrown around and go into trauma, pain. And I have a chapter on this in Activating Your 5D Frequency about how to navigate through 4D, because we have to understand it better. It is really about emotional healing. And as we are able to ground that and open up things so that we stop getting in this sort of insane polarity, we're able to move into the fifth dimension. And the key characteristics are unity consciousness. We understand everything is interconnected. Unconditional love. And when I talk about that, I always say of others but ourselves, because that's a key piece to this. And releasing judgment and unbridled creativity. So we're beginning to activate those frequencies within us. And again, as people are awakening, they may not even have the language, but this is happening. Hearts are opening. The sixth dimension is how we create from. We have created the mess we're in. Okay. I don't think we knew what we were doing. We might have chosen a different way, but thought creates, beliefs create. Plato talked about it as the world of forms. And that hit me actually way before I read Barbara's book. All of a sudden, I understood, my Philosophy 101 class of what Plato was trying to talk into. Physicists call it the quantum field. The Native Americans called it the field of plenty. Anything you can imagine exists in the sixth dimension. And we have an interaction with it. So that as we consciously understand and have enough agreement about what we want to create, we can make choices and energetically connect in such a way that it begins to manifest in our 3D reality. So the 5D frequency is like us at our, as we're beginning to really re-own our light and our beauty. And the sixth dimension is how we put it into action.
So you talked earlier about Arroyo's work and certain of the outer planets, kind of activating. Are they very much involved?
Oh, very good.
In this movement that we're making?
Right. Well, as I know, Pluto went into Aquarius permanently in February. And so absolutely, there are so many ways, though, to access this information. There's so much transformative energy in many ways. Astrology is not the only way to access it. But again, it is similar to being drawn to the Tao of physics. It's scientific. And so, all three outer planets right now have changed signs since February. And we're seeing an explosion of different experiences. Neptune went into Aries, and Aries is pretty intense. It's the god of war. It's Mars. We'll see what happens where Neptune being, our highest spiritual frequency, but also addiction and escapism. Mm-hmm. And then Uranus just went into Gemini. All of a sudden, and you were the first person that mentioned this to me, Sandie, about AI. Since then, which was probably only 2 or 3 weeks ago, 2 more things. really important things have come into my field about this. An astrologer friend of mine said, oh yeah, it's been exploding since early July, just a month.
Yeah.
When it came into our consciousness. So the outer planets are very active.
So you talked about, we can activate. How is there a process? How can we work with this? I mean, we're not just going to be passive and wait for the planets to do their job. We can take the lead.
Exactly. That's really both my books. Well, all my books are really process books, but activating your 5D frequency and the journey, the 6D ascension journey are very much helping people through the process. And one of the things I feel is really important for people to understand is it's not linear. We don't just get it and go, oh, now I'm in 5D. Isn't that great? It's a back and forth process. For human, things have to come up. We've got to move through these things. And that's supposed to happen. That's okay. So we're going to go up and down with frequency, but it helps people, one, begin to tune into what it even means to think about their frequency and to notice, oh, wow, today I feel great. My heart's open. Everything's in alignment. Or conversely, I'm going back to bed. It's not working. And how to begin to, in that observation, use tools to help re-raise the frequency again. So,
kind of tools?
What kind of tools? All right. Well, they're self-awareness tools. Everybody's going to be drawn a little bit differently. A lot of people, just a really deep meditation, journaling, but let me see if I can give you something a little more not used yet, which is not coming immediately to me. What I talk about in the 60 Ascension journey is we're expanding our bandwidth. And I think to be able to look at things from that perspective is really important. And there I've incorporated how to use sacred geometry. And I'm no expert on sacred geometry, but I had to study it for the 6D piece. And it's fabulous and exciting. And it's the way we connect with higher consciousness and stars people, and as well as light language. So those are some tools utilizing understanding frequency. So, as in like feng shui, you want to really work with beauty around you because it creates a certain energy. So those kind of tools.
If you're working with sacred geometry, are you using visualization to create imagery and almost like a program, in a sense that you're going to do this with it and you're going to do that with it and you're going to,
I think that's a great idea. I haven't gotten there yet, but the way I learned it was a relatively young woman in her, I think she had just turned 50, and she passed shortly after I studied with her. Quickly, no illness that would have brought it on. But she ran a class or classes based on drawing sacred geometry so that you experienced it.
Right.
So from there, I still have some of the drawings around. One of the meditations that I put in my newest book is to have people look at Metatron's cube for like 3 minutes and then go into the meditation, which is also looking at Metatron's cube. So yes, what you say, and I think there's so much more that I haven't explored with it yet.
Yeah. I mean, you in the book, you speak about reactivating dormant DNA strands and the light codes that they hold. What changes might we notice in someone as activation happens?
It will feel better to be around them. How's that? Right?
That's a good one.
Right. Because one moves into a much more joyful experience of life. Our hearts are open. And again, to ourselves and to everyone. We don't have to agree. We're not going to agree at this point. There may be behaviors that really disturb us, and we can still hold that higher frequency love and compassion. We're expanding our container to hold that. The light codes. So just very briefly, we have 12 strands of DNA. For a long time, scientists called 10 that were unoperative junk DNA. It cracks me up. I can't tell you how many times I see this, and I've said this, and it just cracks me up. It's what? 10 strands of DNA that serve no purpose? Patriarchal science decided they must know better, right?
Yeah.
Those 10 strands are our star DNA. Those come through from our star ancestors. And as we are reactivating them through opening our hearts, through expanding our bandwidth, but again, it has to be pulled into the body. It's not just a intellectual concept. Something shifts. We begin to become more intuitive. We begin to become more empathic. We get awareness that is quite different than anything we were taught in school. And we begin to understand how we interact with it, with whatever reality we're living in at the moment. And that's when the synchronicities start popping up.
Yes.
On and on and on.
Yeah, I mean, we see this all the time. There are people that I've noticed over the last 5 years who had no interest at all in anything spiritual. Their level was down there, and now suddenly the interest is there, and they think they've always been interested in it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. It's like, it's part of them. It's not like one day I was this and the next day I'm that. It's like, oh no, I've always been this way.
Yeah. And that's when it's really authentic.
Yeah.
And the people that are waking up more recently, man, they are speeding ahead. It seems to me on many levels, including emotional healing, is going much more quickly. And I've been a therapist since when? I don't know, the mid 70s. And, I've seen huge changes and new modalities that have come in to really help this process. But yeah, I would say the last 5 years, people are speeding forward. They may think they're beginners, but as you say, they've always been there.
You've said that shadow healing is an essential step that, we must take before we can fully work with CD. So how are we doing that?
Well, I think there's a lot more permission to do that, first of all. The old paradigm idea was you have to be good. And if you're not good and people don't agree with what you think is good, they're bad. So people are good and people are bad, which obviously is quite a narrow way to view who we really are. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I didn't put her book in, but she was very influential. I got to meet her when I was in graduate school. She was amazing. And I was at a conference that she was the keynote speaker some years later. When I met her, she wasn't, she was just beginning her work. As a keynote speaker, it was combining spirituality and science conference. She talked about how we all have a Hitler inside of us. And that was extremely important coming from her. She wasn't in the camps. She was Swiss, but after the war, after World War II, she went in, she toured the camps, she worked with survivors. So she really experienced what that meant. And what her point is that we have the capacity as humans to be anything. We can be the very worst and we can be the very best. And all of us hold that. I mean, she didn't talk about us being holographic, but in fact, that's really what was going on. We hold it all. So yes, I might really be a nice person. I care about people. I try to be kind and do good things. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to have a nasty little thought after, right? Of course I have that. It's part of being human. So we need to own those things. The more we can understand we have those potentials and send them love and disempower them, when they stay in the unconscious, they begin to get a lot of power. So shadow work is really about bringing all those inner nasties, probably call them something more neutral, up into our awareness so we can be compassionate with them and then not act on them.
Yeah.
As people very subtly, when you haven't worked with it, you will act on it. You may not be killing people, but you're putting out harming energy without intention, without a negative intention. So It's about becoming more and more conscious and not being afraid. That takes a lot of courage. because you have to hit some taboo areas. Wait, I'm not supposed to feel this way.
How do you see our relationship to time changing as more people step into the 5D, 6D consciousness?
That's such a big topic. I only have a little smidgen of it, but I think where I'll start with what we've known for quite a while is that in the right hemisphere of the brain, this is probably from the studies they did, I think, in the 60s, the two halves of our brain, doesn't experience time linearly. If you had a trauma 50 years ago and you've not worked to heal it, it is still operative and feels as if it's still going on. So that was my entry into understanding there's place, and Einstein brought this forth too, where linear time doesn't exist and all time, one experiences all time is simultaneous. As we move into these higher dimensional frequencies, and one of Barbara Hand Clow's favorite people wrote a book called The End of Time. He was a physicist, Barbara. I don't know. I know you've had Barbara on, but, and I tried to read it and I'm like, I'm not that smart. It's not, my brain doesn't want to do all that. And so he pretty much proved it through physics. Where I think it's going to be operative, which is probably, just on a more practical level, is when we're operating out of those higher frequencies, when we've got more and more of that star DNA going, we won't need clocks per se. We will just know intuitively. All right, now let's gather. Now it's being in the now. Really.
Being in the now, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think in our transitional periods, we need linear time, but not to be run by it. And that's also quite a challenge,
Yeah.
So I hope that answered your question.
You write about civilizations like Lemuria, Atlantis, ancient Egypt as models of higher consciousness living. What lessons could we learn from them?
So many. The most important being that we can have a world where we're balanced, where we're loving, where our energies go not to have to defend ourselves or live from our egos would be another simple way to say it, but a spiritually aware world where we focus on how can I talk to my garden today to make it more productive so more people can have this wonderful bounty? When we understand that we're all interconnected, we understand that if I hurt you, I'm hurting me. And so for no other reason, people in those civilizations, now Atlantis was more complex, as we know. It got more divided and it wasn't more of a masculine and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but it was more masculine and it created some incredible buildings. And, I have images of what those buildings looked like, where Lemuria was more feminine. And so the feminine part of ourselves knows how to interconnect more easily, where the masculine tends to create structures, and structures are good, but not without the feminine in equal balance. So they modeled hugely to us. Atlantis at its height was technologically amazing from the little I understand. And that's one reason, one of the things I've heard, and I think this was the second fall of Atlantis, is they powered everything. There were some satellites and that activated crystals on the Earth and they knew how to use it. And the pyramids, I'm sure, and this has been written about as well lately, the pyramids were power centers. They weren't there. They didn't build those incredible structures for dead people. It's just as the society devolved, that's what happened. There's supposedly rooftop landings for outer spatials on top of the pyramids. And they knew how to source or resource, I don't quite have the right word, so that these power centers could generate power so people could have lives that were as comfortable, if not more so, than the lives that we have today. But they were spiritually aware and they were in balance. And in the Egyptian passing, one of their death pieces is to pass in that transition out of the body with the heart as light as a feather.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about a lighthearted, just simple, a really, really lighthearted civilization where people are joyful and they're kind and they're having fun with each other.
On your journey, have you noticed, what changes have you noticed in yourself? I know we all get a bit wiser and, perhaps more mellow as we grow older, but have you experienced capabilities coming online that you didn't have that really surprised you?
Well, I think the first thing, and again, it's the most simple thing, was after I had that awakening through the Yogananda experience, I became happier and happier and happier. My life worked better and better and better. Not perfect, we're here. There are challenges, but in terms of perspective, that I just lived out of a different way to live. My perspective changed and it becomes self-reinforcing. In terms of intuitive, the book I did not put on there, I don't even know if I had read the whole thing, was Opening to Channel, that I imagine other people have added to your book club. That was also, no.
Not heard of it a lot. It may be in there, but it's not been a frequent one.
All right. Well, it was a channel. Sonoya, I don't know. I have the books, but they're about 3 or 4 books. And, and I read that in the 80s. So that in terms of psychic opening, that had really started with Yogananda. It got more and more and more. And while I don't consider myself a channel, there's another piece I can add to this. When I work with people, I always go, and I would do this when I had a large practice in Springfield. Not everybody was into the spiritual, although a lot of my clients came because they knew I held to that. But I would just say, give me a moment, and I close my eyes and I go in, and then the answer comes or the awareness comes. But what was most surprising was I started feeling what my clients were feeling. And I was able to really use that in helping them heal. So, and I had to be really careful. And this is where, as we become more empathic, of course, it's more and more challenging. So it was great in session. It was great. All the information I needed came. One day I was standing in line in one of those big box stores during the holidays, right after Christmas, I think, returning something. And I felt this wave of anxiety. I'm thinking, I'm not anxious. It's not mine. And I realized it was a big line, a lot of people. I was picking it up. And at that point, and this is where I'm really grateful. And I know, I'm very lucky that I was able to do this. I just went, that's it. I am not opening when I'm just out and about. I am going to essentially just use this in my practice. So, but that's hard to, I've passed that on to many, many, and not everybody can do it. But to find those boundaries was really important. But that also changed, if I work with you and I can feel when anger comes up for you or grief or fear, or that really is helpful. So that's developed more and more over time, as has my ability to, I would say I'm a downloader more than a channel. When I need the answer, it is when, it's like you write. So you write a book. It's like, who's writing the book, right?
If you could leave listeners with one practical step to begin working consciously with their, with the 6th dimension, what would it be?
Be gentle with yourself. It's a new learning. So be open, but also understand if you create an intention to create something in your life and it's not happening, you have a lot of unconscious intention, and that's okay. Bring it into consciousness, work with it, and be kind to yourself as well as everybody else.
Steve Jobs famously gave all of the people at his memorial service a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi.
Really? I didn't know. I knew that it.
So what book would you give to people at your memorial service?
I don't know if it would be a book on my list, because those are books you have to kind of step into and really study. I would have to think about that. I don't know if I can answer, Sandie, because I'd want to find something that just held an essence and that was fun for people to read. So I have to ponder that more.
Yeah, I put you on the spot there.
It's okay.
Judith Corvin-Blackburn, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was great.
So, before we close, listening to Judith describe her choices, it's clear these aren't just books that she's read. They're milestones in a lifetime of transformation. Each one opened up a new layer of understanding, deepened her courage to live her soul's agreement, and offered images of what a more awakened world could look like. They're reminders that the right words at the right time can change your mind, rewire your reality, and sometimes even alter the shape of your future. You can learn more about Judith Corvin-Blackburn's books, online classes, videos, Global Shamanic Multidimensional Mystery School at empoweringthespirit.com. And if you're looking for several powerful meditations to access your highest soul wisdom, check out her YouTube channel, Wisdom Within Us. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 Best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me.
If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you'll love our other shows. The Synergy Sessions, where leading-edge thinkers collide in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities. Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysterious consciousness, energy, and the hidden layers of reality, where science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. And the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where leading-edge new thought speakers, teachers, authors, and luminaries who've walked this path before you share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on their life journey. All 3 shows are available on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and all major podcast platforms. For more information, visit sedgbeer.com. That's SEDGBEER.com.